Hello everyone, and welcome to my review for the Dead Space Remake. I'm your host, Colors Fade. I'm not sure I've ever done a more dramatic 180 on a game than I have with the Dead Space Remake. I started a Let's Play of this game when it first was released, but around Chapter 7 I became frustrated and rage quit. Fast forward 2.5 years later, I decided to give it another try. I figured if I adjusted my attitude a little bit and reset my expectations, I'd have a good time. And you know what? It worked. This time around, I loved it. If you're unfamiliar with Dead Space, this is a remake of the survival horror game from 2011 that was originally developed by Visceral Studios and published by Electronic Arts. EA tapped Motive Studios for the remake, and to make a long story short, what they've done, in addition to giving it a massive graphical overhaul, is take a lot of the positive enhancements from Dead Space 2 and incorporate them into this game. The result is that it's basically the best of both worlds. Everything good from Dead Space 1 and 2 is now a part of this game, and it's amazing. Now, since I've never played the original title from 2011, this review is strictly about the remake. If you're looking for a side-by-side comparison to the 2011 game, there are plenty of videos on YouTube that cover that ground. I'm more interested in reviewing this as a standalone title, so without further ado, let's get started. Fair warning, there will be spoilers later in this review when I talk about the writing, but I will be sure to reiterate the warning at that time. You play the game as Isaac Clarke, an engineer who's been dispatched aboard the starship called the Killian to rendezvous and repair the USG Ishimura, the most successful of humanity's planet cracker mining vessels. Something's knocked out the Ishimura's communications, so Isaac and his crew have been sent to diagnose the problem and fix it. As a bonus, Isaac's love interest is also stationed aboard the Ishimura, so he's understandably looking forward to spending some quality time with his main squeeze, since they've been apart for quite some time. Unfortunately, it doesn't take long to realize the Ishimura has more going on than a broken comms relay. The ship has been overrun by deadly creatures of unknown origin, some of which appear to be wearing the uniforms of the Ishimura's crew. After a brief escape, Isaac finds himself separated from his fellow crew members, and the only thing he can rely on is a trusty old engineering tool and the game's most iconic weapon, the cutter. From this point on, Isaac proceeds through a story that is broken up into 12 chapters, wherein he's tasked with important objectives, like repairing the ship's comms array or launching an SOS beacon. But in true survival horror fashion, successfully completing these objectives doesn't lead to his salvation, and instead only serves to move the goalposts. Along the way, the Ishimura's backstory is revealed through a series of text logs, audio journals, and a few conversations with the scant survivors that remain. As to how the Ishimura got in this situation, turns out the crew is largely comprised of a group of religious nutjobs called unitologists, and they've come to Aegis 7 under the guise of the planet-cracking mining mission to bring back a strange object called the Marker. This, as it turns out, is what's responsible for transforming the crew of the Ishimura into monsters, as it can reanimate dead flesh. For some folks like Isaac, the Marker is a nightmare machine, but to the true believers of unitology, it is their salvation. They believe it will allow them to cheat death in an ascension ritual they call convergence. Understandably, Isaac wants to get the hell off the ship and get as far away from these crazy people as possible, but that, as they say, is easier said than done. The Dead Space Remake is one of the best looking games I've ever seen. Everything from textures to lighting to shadows looks amazing. The game's locations are suitably eerie, and the architectural design of every element, from walls to Isaac's suit, has a clear focus. The developers like ribs, if you can't tell. I love this though, because much like H.R. Giger's iconic designs for the Alien franchise, Dead Space has a unique style all its own, and it does a great job adding to the dark and foreboding atmosphere. The creatures in particular are expertly crafted. They even incorporate a layered flesh system that allows a lot more reactivity with the game's various weapons. See, in Dead Space, shooting enemies isn't good enough. To kill most of them, you need to dismember them, which is why engineering tools like the cutter and the line gun are so much more effective than traditional weapons like the pulse rifle. But there are other tools as well, like the Force Gun, which will rip the layers of flesh off the enemies. And it's weapons like this that put the multi-layered flesh system of the enemies on full display. This is just one design decision among many that the developers have implemented, which help elevate Dead Space above other games in this genre. Another smart decision, implemented by the game's original development studio, was to put the game's HUD elements on Isaac's suit and his weapons. Isaac's health, his stasis fuel, and his ammo count are all on his person instead of as separate elements on the screen. This keeps the HUD from becoming cluttered, which in turn makes the game feel even more immersive. And it's this immersion that allows all of the game's jump scares and tense moments to actually work. Bottom line, if there's a better looking game than the Dead Space Remake, I'm struggling to think of what it might be. I love pretty graphics, and I've long said that I'm a graphics snob when it comes to video games. I've played a lot of gorgeous games over the years, and I can say with confidence this is as good as anything I've played. Much like the graphics, the sound design in Dead Space is also stellar. I usually don't spend much time talking about sound in video games, but in this case, the Dead Space Remake deserves some heavy praise. All the weapons, enemies, and even the ambient ship noises are perfectly crafted and expertly mixed. I play all my games with a pair of in-ear monitors, but even doing that, the sound design in some games can feel pretty bland and flat, but not this game. The way voices muffle based on proximity to Isaac and the direction he's facing, or whether you're on the other side of some glass.
Okay, got us some power. Ventilation's up. Power to the elevator should be...
Hazardous anomaly detected. Quarantine activated.
Another malfunction?
No. The quarantine systems are all fine.
Oh, wait. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah, man.
Take it easy. Daniels, get those elevators running.
There's something in here with us.
Up there! Oh, God! Ted! No! Daniels, get the doors open!
Even the way the sound dissipates as you transition into an airless zero-G environment.
Entering vacuum.
It all sounds perfect. Honestly, I've never played a game where the sound design captured my attention so thoroughly. Usually the only time I notice sound design is when it's bad, but in this case, I kept noticing it because it's so damn good. It's the kind of game that other development studios need to play and study so they understand how to create the best audio experience possible. This is a true masterclass in sound design. The first time I played the Dead Space Remake, I became frustrated by the survival aspect of the game, which really boils down to conservation of ammo. But that was, as the kids would say, a skill issue. The truth is the developers have done a great job of giving Isaac a litany of tools to deal with the game's various enemies, and it wasn't until my second playthrough that I really understood all of this. On the surface, Dead Space is about dismembering enemies to kill them. It's a slow, plodding shooter, as Isaac is an engineer in a heavy protective environmental suit and not a twitchy video game soldier with hyper-quick movement skills. However, even though it seems like a simple shooter, it's not. The game within a game here is learning when not to shoot a weapon, and instead to safely and effectively use a different tool, which allows Isaac to kill enemies without expending ammo. The player is given a pair of tools that help in this regard. The first is called stasis, which allows Isaac to put enemies into a slow motion freeze for a few seconds. This is often enough time to allow him to accurately and smartly target enemy appendages with his cutter and use environmental objects like explosives, or in the case of some enemies, just to run away and escape. The second tool though, the more powerful tool, is kinesis. Gives him the ability to pull objects toward him and then throw them at his foes. It's not only fun, but it's necessary. With kinesis, Isaac can use pipes, explosives, other objects, or even a creature's own sharp slasher appendages against them. Killing an enemy with its own bladed appendage saves a ton of ammo, and if the player gets good at learning how and when to utilize this tool, ammo conservation becomes a non-issue. In addition, it pays to understand how the game hands out ammo. Isaac can carry as many weapons as he wants, but he can only equip 4 of them at a time. Thanks, console controllers. And yet, enemies will drop ammunition for any weapon Isaac has in his inventory, whether it's equipped or not. What this means is that if the player doesn't intend to use a particular weapon, they should put it in storage to prevent the game from dropping ammunition for it. Otherwise, Isaac will end up with a wide spread of ammo, but not enough of any one type to really be useful. New players won't know any of this, and the game doesn't tell you that this is how loot works. So if you're like me and it's your first time playing Dead Space, you'll probably want to carry every weapon you find, which leads to a situation where you have a little bit of ammo for every kind of weapon, but not enough to make any of them really viable. And since equipping a new weapon in the middle of combat is not something you want to do, it pays to figure out which of the 4 weapons you want to keep equipped and then put the rest in storage. That way, you're only getting ammunition drops for the weapons you currently have equipped. In the original Dead Space, Isaac was a silent protagonist. However, with Dead Space 2 and 3, he was voiced by actor Gunnar Wright. With the remake, they've decided to bring Gunnar back and give voice to Isaac just as he did in Dead Space 2 and 3. Thus, much of the game's dialogue has been rewritten to accommodate this change, so Isaac could have meaningful back and forth conversations with the other characters. As such, new voice actors were brought in to record new lines for the other characters. Having never played the original Dead Space, I cannot say how I feel about this change. I'm not the kind of gamer that feels strongly one way or the other when it comes to silent protagonists. I know this is a hill that a lot of players like to die on, but not me. I like silent protagonists, but if dialogue is good and the voice acting is great, I'm all for voiced protagonists too. What I can say is that I like Gunnar Wright's work very much, and the character of Isaac feels a lot more real to me because of his voice work. Isaac will, for instance, actually say his lines differently based on how injured he is at the time he's speaking. It's a small touch, but really cool, and it's the kind of detail that adds depth to the game. On the whole, I found almost all the writing in the game to be very good, with a few exceptions, and unfortunately these exceptions are fairly egregious. Now, in order to discuss the writing, this is where I have to talk about spoilers. So if you don't want any part of the story spoiled for you, skip ahead to the next section. My biggest complaint, and this is basically the problem I have with a lot of horror movies as well, is that there are points in the story when the only way for the plot to move forward is for the characters to become complete morons. This, by the way, is why this Geico ad is so funny.
Let's hide in the attic.
No, in the basement. Why can't we just get in the running car?
Are you crazy? Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Smart. Yeah, okay.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
This is a good idea. Shh, I'm being quiet. Breathing on me.
The first egregious case of bad writing here involves Hammond, who watched his crewmate Chen get killed by a monster at the start of the game. Then later, Chen gets converted into a monster by the marker, just like the rest of the crew of the Ishimura. Sometime after that, Hammond imprisons Chen in an escape pod, and then wisely jettisons him into space. This is a smart move, but unfortunately it comes back to bite everyone in an unexpected way, and I actually like this plot twist quite a bit, except for when it starts to become dumb. The part I didn't like was that much later on, when faced with Monster Chen, Hammond turns into a complete moron. For some inexplicable stupid reason, Hammond's brain shuts off and he suddenly thinks he has to save Chen. Hammond, the same guy who wisely understood earlier that Chen was beyond saving and had to be disposed of, now thinks that despite everything that's happened and everything he's seen, Chen must be saved. Basically, Hammond gets lobotomized by the writers here and subsequently gets killed. It's one of the most egregious cases of moron-itis that I've ever seen in a game or a film, and I found that really disappointing. And the thing is, there were other ways to kill Hammond that would have been more believable. The writers didn't need to lobotomize him in order for the scene to work. Remember, ammunition conservation is a theme throughout this game. Why not have Hammond run out of ammo in this moment? We could have easily believed that, and it wouldn't require Hammond becoming an idiot for it to work. He could have died, and we could have still respected him. Instead, in the end, we think of him as a moron. It's an unfortunate scene of stupidity in a game that is mostly intelligent otherwise. But that's not the only writing problem. When Hammond jettisons Chen's escape pod, it gets picked up by the Valor, a military vessel on its way to the Ishimura. Turns out, EarthGov knew the unitologists were coming out here to grab the marker, so they sent a ship full of soldiers to put a stop to it and quarantine the giant mining vessel. Unfortunately, they pick up Chen's escape pod en route. By itself, that's a great plot twist. But here's where it gets stupid. We've just spent the past 8 hours running all over the Ishimura, killing these creatures with not weapons, but engineering tools. And yet, the writers want us to believe that Monster Chen jumped out an escape pod and single-handedly was deadly enough to overpower these spawn-faced super soldiers and take out the pilot of the Valor, causing it to crash into the Ishimura. Please. This is a leap of logic I just couldn't make. And the sad thing is that, again, like Hammond's lobotomy, it didn't have to happen that way. I understand the writers needed the Valor to crash into the Ishimura, so it's not a viable escape vehicle for Isaac and his friends, but there's no reason they couldn't have gotten to that point through a different and smarter means. The Valor could have simply docked with the Ishimura, and then the soldiers could have got their asses handed to them by the Ishimura's denizens when they came aboard. It would have been kinda cool, actually, to have Daniels relaying us footage of these soldiers getting overwhelmed by the various horrors that we've spent the past 8 hours dealing with. Hell, you could have left a pilot and perhaps another soldier aboard the Valor and had an alien-style moment like we did with Pharaoh and Spunkmeyer as the Monster Chen breaks out of the escape pod and offs them both, causing the Valor to undock and crash into the Ishimura. The only reason this illogical bit of writing exists is because the writers want the payoff from the unexpected twist of Chen's escape pod coming back to bite everyone in the ass. And I get it, because that is a theme for every objective in this game. Each time Isaac completes a mission, the goalposts get moved. But I don't think this one little twist is worth all the illogical storytelling that comes after. You're trying to tell me that a ship full of dudes dressed up like Spawn in heavy armor with all the advanced weaponry of a futuristic military society can't ward off one monster like Chen? Please, that just doesn't make any sense. Finally, I have one last gripe about the writing, and it's that the story eventually veers into the territory of psychological horror. Again, spoiler alert here, folks. The marker makes people see things that aren't there. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but to me, real horrors are 1,000 times more scary than psychological horrors. When you tell me that something is inside a character's head, that, to me, is basically as dumb as the whole "it was all a dream" trope. You're not scaring me by telling me Isaac isn't really seeing his girlfriend. You're just making the story dumber. And I understand this is a really personal thing. Some people really like psychological horror, but I am not one of them. I don't find it to be scary at all. I just find it boring. Dead Space has a lot of scary shit in it already. The marker creating monsters that have to be dismembered, everything going wrong with every objective Isaac works on, and the goalposts constantly moving, a ship full of religious cultists who think the marker is their salvation, when in reality it simply turns people into horrific creatures. All of that is real. And frankly, it's scary as hell. But then to go and wrap it in a cellophane bubble of psychological horror, I just found that disappointing. To be a little bit more specific about what I'm talking about, we discover near the end of the story that the person Isaac has been talking to this whole time isn't his love interest. It's some other woman. And the marker has been making him think it's his girlfriend this whole time. You tell me, does that make the horror of this story better? I don't think so. If it were me, I'd have rather had this strange woman string Isaac along the whole time, telling him she knows where his girlfriend is, and if he'll just get her off of this ship, she'll tell him how to save her. Then, when we finally reach the moment of truth, we learn that his girlfriend has been dead the whole time. There's no saving her. It was never going to happen. Yeah, it's a trope too, but at least it's grounded in reality, and it's better than the psychological angle, in my opinion. That kind of ending would have been real, and we could have believed it, and it's easy to believe that people will lie to try to save their own ass. It would have felt real, and it would have had more of a kick in the teeth to us than learning that his girlfriend has been a mirage the whole time. Anyway, that's just me and my opinion. I know that for a lot of people, these writing quibbles won't matter. I seem to be the only person who really gets worked up by the writing in video games, but I felt these transgressions were egregious enough to drag the game down a notch. And that's unfortunate because everything else about the Dead Space remake is so damn good. Writing issues aside, the Dead Space remake is one of the best games I've ever played. Ridley Scott's Alien is one of my 2 most favorite films of all time, and the Dead Space remake sits comfortably in that vein. It's atmospheric, creepy, dark, suspenseful, tense, and scary. The visuals are stunning, the audio design is top-notch, and the gameplay is uniquely fun. It has all the ingredients you want in a great game, and I'm happy I gave it another shot. Okay folks, that's it for this one. I'm your host, Colors Fade, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave questions and comments down below, and consider subscribing to my channel. And until next time, happy gaming everyone.